Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. This is Jess from the Keto Fit, and today we are going to be talking all about fasting as a form of self-care. So in just a few minutes here, I have a very special guest coming on, Shana Hassan, and I'm going to be pulling her in as soon as she requests to join. Shana, just click that request to join button for me. Here we go. Okay, and we should be live here now. So Shana is a registered dietitian. Hey, Shana, thanks for popping in. Hey, I was just introducing you to everybody. So Shana is a registered dietitian, and I recently listened to the first episode of her podcast, which tells her whole story. Remind me of the name of your podcast?
Fast to Heal Stories.
Fast to Heal Stories. So everybody go and check that out. And the first episode, she shares her story, which I found to be so intriguing. So Shana is a registered dietitian, and she used to do the whole typical protocol of prescribing her patients on a low-fat, high-carb, calorie restriction diet. And she shared that basically, while she might have seen temporary results with her patients on this, it was never really able to last in the long term. And so it wasn't actually until she went through some health challenges with her son, which I'll allow her to tell you about, that she realized that we really need to flip that food pyramid on its head and prioritize lower carb, higher fat to really heal our bodies. And so, Shana, thank you so much for being here today. And would you just share with everybody a little bit more about your story, how you came into the low carb world and how it has changed your life?
Yeah, you're welcome. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me to come. I just have to say hi to Jimmy. I see you.
Hey, Jimmy.
But yeah, I've been in the nutrition space a really long time, over 20 years, which will definitely age me. But it was about 10 years in, and that's kind of sad that it took me that long to think, people aren't really healing that well. They're not seeing long-term results. People are, everybody's getting sicker and fatter. What's going on? And I was starting to deal with more of my own personal struggles. I was dealing with bloating pretty much every day. I was eating from the time I woke up, usually until the time I went to bed. I was eating a lot of healthy whole grains like I was supposed to. I was recommending all of that to my clients, and I worked both in the outpatient clinic as a dietitian, and then I did a lot of health coaching. So I kind of was all over the place. And after about 10 years, I started to question some things, but I thought maybe it was just me personally. And then about 15 years into me being a dietitian, my son got really sick. And as you said, and he was 11 when he had the symptoms. He actually got diagnosed the day after he turned 12. So very young. He was very healthy up until that point, and he ended up being diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is a very terrible inflammatory bowel disease. But all his doctors wanted to just stack medications for him, and medication. And I thought, well, this is a digestive disease. Why in the world aren't we talking about nutrition? And when the very first day he was diagnosed, I was given a handout that made me want to vomit. It was just all like low fiber processed foods, like white bread, white tortillas, crackers, everything that's supposedly easy to digest, mushy, canned vegetables, canned fruits. It was terrible. It was just like inflammation on the sheet. So I knew intuitively enough, like, okay, no way. Like they don't know much about nutrition. And I was questioning his gastroenterologist, and he would always tell me nutrition has nothing to do with this disease. It's an autoimmune illness. And through years of investigating and really just doing a deep dive myself, I had to do it on my own. You know this. It's like nobody in the conventional system, and I don't want to lump all the doctors together, because I know there are definitely some different minded out there, but everyone that I talk to is just like, take these medications. The medications don't work. We might have to perform surgery. And my son actually got sick enough. He was in the hospital for 5 days that we had a surgeon come in and talked with us. But anyway, I just did like a deep dive into nutrition, and a deep dive into what is the catalyst that's causing this. Is it an infection? Is it mold? Is it yeast? Is it food? Is it a chemical? And nobody could give me any answers. And actually they just would look at me like I was a crazy person. So
Right.
I ended up just doing my own thing and kind of pulling out of that conventional system. I found an integrative doctor who was very helpful for healing him. But I left the conventional space. I couldn't do it anymore. I just thought I can't recommend things I don't believe in anymore. At that point, I had gone like grain-free, gluten-free. I had really focused on changing the fats that I was eating and prioritizing protein. So I basically was eating completely different than what I had been. And I also started to hear rumblings of intermittent fasting while I was listening to podcasts and reading from professionals with a more holistic view. And I will tell you, Jess, at first I was like, okay, I would just kind of tune it out and be like, all right, whatever, another intermittent fast, or, just kind of the nutrition I was on board with those changes, but the fasting I thought was still kind of way out there. Like, who wants to skip breakfast?
Yeah.
So I just started doing it myself and just inching, closing that eating window that I had and doing it slowly. And I saw really big progress. And then I went back to work at a very small clinic, holistic clinic, and I tried it on a subset of people, like lower carb eating and intermittent fasting, and introducing that to them, and they did amazing. It was only 18 people, but I couldn't believe the progress that they saw in such a short time. I only did the pilot program for like 12 weeks. So that's when I kind of started piecing together a book and writing out a step-by-step program. And that was, when did I release my book? 2020 of April 2020. So right in COVID. So it's just been on a little over about a year and a half since I released the book. I now have my own online business and my online programs, and that combination has worked so well for people. And a lot of times people think, oh, well, fasting is just calorie deprivation or starvation, and it's so the opposite. And keto too, it's like people see it as restrictive. It's like, no, you're just eating real food and you're healing your hormones. And what's restrictive is having to be on medications and feeling ill all the time and not enjoying life because you're not at your best health. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into the space, and kind of my backstory, but it took a long time to kind of come out of that conventional thinking and say, okay, there's something wrong with eating all of these processed grains and processed foods and processed fats and having to eat small frequent meals. Like, that doesn't really make sense for weight loss. So that's how I got to where I am now.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for sharing your story. And also, man, I don't know if there's any other moms that are watching right now that can resonate, but nothing in the world, I'm convinced, is as powerful as that mama bear instinct, and dads too, but that parental instinct of just like, no, I'm not going to take that as an answer. We, even above and beyond what we would do for ourselves, we'll move heaven and earth to help our kids. And so you've done such a good job at modeling for us what it means to be an advocate for your child's health, but also for your own. And I'm sure you work with a lot of clients that experience this as well. I do too, where we're finding that you actually have to go above and beyond just taking your doctor's word for it. Like you said, there are a lot of great doctors that are learning more of the more recent science, but a lot of these doctors, they went to medical school like decades and decades ago. And even at that time, they took like 2 weeks of nutrition training, and they'll tell you that. And so, it really, we have to do our own research and find people who maybe will give us the answers we're looking for. I love that you said you went to see a functional doctor, because that can actually be a lot better for people sometimes. So now you mentioned that you were like kind of doubtful yourself about fasting at first too. You started hearing about it on podcasts, and it wasn't until you actually kind of saw the proof in the pudding with yourself and then also with the clients that you were working with. So that 1-2 punch of doing keto or low carb along with fasting. So here's my question. So you hear this a lot of times if you've been out there, you people that are joining, I know you're all like keto nerds like us, right? You hear this thing that is like keto mimics fasting. So that's one of the reasons, the mechanisms of why it really helps with fat loss is because it does switch your body over into fat burning the same way that fasting would. And you lose that initial water weight and everything. You're burning fat for fuel. You do experience some benefits of autophagy when you're in ketosis. So what is it though that really makes the difference though with adding fasting to it? So I know you mentioned a lot of people were still stalling on keto and then they add fasting in and it really changes the game for them. Like what's the mechanism there?
Yeah, well, fasting will just get you there a whole lot faster because there's no food coming in as opposed to the higher fat, higher protein foods. So it accelerates the process basically. So yeah, with keto, it's just beautiful because you aren't using glucose as your main fueling system anymore, which is just so far beyond what most people experience. So that will definitely help to bring your insulin levels down, and it, like you said, pushes you into that fat burning. But I think I've seen this with a lot of clients, and and we can kind of differentiate between low carb and keto. I usually start people more at a lower carb, 100 grams or so, see how they do, look at their past history, what are their goals, and then we can scooch that down further, like 25 to 50, depending on what their goals are and how sick they are. But yeah, you throw fasting in there and that's going to burn out those glycogen stores, which happens during keto too, because you're keeping your carbs really low. But your body's going to then have to look for another fueling source, and that's where it turns to body fat. But I think where a lot of people can get tripped up is that they're still eating all the time, even though they're keto foods and they're whole, natural, healthy, nutritional foods, they're still eating all the time. So even though they don't have the glycogen stores, their insulin levels can still be high, and that can make it difficult to get to that fat burning stage. So yeah, you throw the fasting in there and it lowers that insulin that much sooner. And then another mistake people can make is they just eat too much fat, and your body's going to burn fat in your bloodstream before it goes and looks for stored body fats. It's just easier. It's like, oh, well, cool, these fatty acids are already in my blood, I'm just going to burn these up. Whereas you throw fasting in there, and I'm not saying you have to do it every single day, you don't have to do like these wild long fasts, but you give your body time to heal when you're not fasting and bring those insulin levels down, and then it's going to be forced to tap into stored body fat. And that's the ultimate goal for most people. Is most people come to intermittent fasting and keto, to improve health, but a lot of it is for weight loss. And it's going to be difficult to achieve weight loss unless you're really focusing on getting good balanced meals and then going long periods of time without eating. It's like some people will pop 20 fat bombs a day and like, oh, well, why aren't I losing weight? So it just depends what your goal is. Like my goal is not to lose weight. I'm at a healthy weight where I am at. I fast more for longevity and for disease prevention and just to maintain my weight, because it's pretty effortless to maintain my weight doing the lifestyle that I do now. But when I was eating all the time and when I was eating higher carbohydrate, and I was a runner, so I had the mentality that I need to eat a lot of carbs. It was tough to maintain my weight. Like I did it, but I felt like I had to exercise pretty much every day. I was training for half marathons and marathons, and it was a lot. It was actually more inflammatory for me. And now with this and keeping inflammation down and focusing on natural whole foods and just eating once or twice a day, I feel so much better, and I don't really worry about my weight anymore. Because even though I was thin, I still thought about everything I was eating and whether or not it was going to push my weight up. And Anyone who goes to my Instagram page, I made a post a couple of days about my immediate family, not my kids, but my two sisters and my parents. And I am the only normal weight person. I
Yeah.
shouldn't say normal, healthy weight
Right.
person in my immediate family. So I was not dealt the genetics like, hey, you're going to be, the slim trim. No, I mean, very strong diabetes and heart disease in my family, lots of overweight people, lots of insulin resistance. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's apparent there for sure.
Yeah, I can resonate with that. A lot of, metabolic unhealth runs in my family. When I was growing up, I looked around and it was even told to me, like, look around, this is what we look like, this is what you're going to look like as you grow up. And, that was a really limiting belief for me for a long time. But keto changed everything for me. And I hear you saying basically the same thing. So for anybody that's still kind of on the fence about like, okay, I already eat keto, why should I fast? I'm hearing you say, let me make sure that I understand it correctly, is that anytime that we are eating, we're still producing some of an insulin response. And so as long as we're producing any insulin response at all, we're actually not able to withdraw fuel from our fat cells to actually burn the stored body fat for fuel. We're burning the dietary fat that we're consuming for fuel. And so if we really want to increase fat loss, then shortening our eating window and allowing more time to be in a fasted state is what's really going to unlock, breaking down our stored body fat for fuel. Is that right?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Awesome.
And I do want to mention that there's different degrees of insulin responses, and it's really hard to it'll differ from person to person. But processed foods, by far, sugar, any processed carbohydrates, those are going to stimulate a bigger insulin response than whole natural carbohydrates. And then protein is less of a response. Fat is the least of a response as far as insulin goes. But yeah, you still release insulin when you eat. It's just it'll vary in levels and kind of follows blood sugar. So if you've monitored your blood sugar and you have a big blood sugar response, well, you need more insulin because that energy is just floating around in the cell or in the bloodstream. So yeah, so they kind of go hand in hand. So then you're going to release more insulin to get that blood sugar out of the bloodstream. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. So I know Dr. Jason Fung talks about this, and you are a fan of his. And so I love how he talks about how basically it's like two levers for fat loss. You can pull the lever of what you eat, and then you can also pull the lever of when you eat. And when you put those two things together, it just gives you the best of both worlds, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one or the other at first. It's like people ask, well, what do you think is more important, the fasting at first or what you're eating at first? And I kind of look at that as at a person to person level. It's like if somebody's been eating healthfully for a really long time and they're making pretty good choices, well, then we want to focus more on the fasting because you've already pretty close, like you're already eating whole foods. We just really need to work on the meal timing. But if you're somebody who is eating the SAD diet or the standard American diet, maybe we should work on cleaning that up first. And then just, getting out of that snacking mentality, not eating after dinner, and then slowly starting to push back the time that you're eating in the morning or whenever that you break your fast, but really cleaning that up so that you are able to fast longer because, it's really tough. Like those people who, if you're here and you're eating keto, it's like fasting is intermittent fasting is basically like, oh, no big deal. But if you're on the standard American diet, it's really tough to adapt that. So, I get that question a lot and it's like, oh, you kind of look at where you're at, what your lifestyle is, what you're eating now, and focus on, for at least for a couple of weeks, like focus on one or the other so you don't get overwhelmed, get the inflammation down, get some healthier foods in, start to narrow that window a little bit, and then go from there.
Yeah, that's a question that I get asked a lot too. Like, should I start fasting right away when I start keto or should I hold off? And so I'm hearing you say that what you advise your clients on is to get into ketosis first, and then fasting comes a little bit easier. It's more natural and easy to start practice intermittent fasting, right?
Yeah, typically it is. It's just, it's like when you're in ketosis, intermittent fasting is a breeze, but if you're eating a lot of sugar, it can be really tricky. And then people give up, and that's the
Right.
last thing you want. It's like, well, that didn't work for me for a week. So,
Right.
so it's gonna give up. But yeah, if you kind of do it in steps and chunks and little by little, then you definitely see a lot more success. And obviously support's a big piece of that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of like an all or nothing person too. Like I'm like a go big or go home person. Like I did not titrate down on my carbohydrates. I was just one day I was like, I'm going to do keto. And some people really are more wired that way, I think. Like they're just like a cold turkey, all in, go big or go home kind of a person. And then other people are like, I'm going to work my way down. So first I'm going to cut out bread, and then I'm going to cut out sweets, and then I'm going to, and I've seen some people be successful on that as well. So it's good to leave room for different personality styles. But apart from the personality styles, I tell my clients too with fasting, like you're basically going to set yourself up to have a really hard time if you try to start fasting right away. It could actually be easy or it could be really hard. Which way would you like to have it? And so if you just wait a few weeks for your body to adjust to ketosis, it's going to suppress your appetite, and fasting will be easy and intuitive. You're just kind of listening to your body saying, I'm not hungry, as opposed to trying to white knuckle it and force it and wait for some little app to tell you when it's time to eat.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And for many people who are coming into the intermittent fasting or keto world, their hunger and satiety and their hormones are all whacked out.
Yeah.
And so the message of intuitive eating, like, I love it if your hormones are healthy.
Yeah.
But the problem we run into is like we try to be intuitive eaters and say, okay, I'm going to only eat when I'm hungry and I'm going to stop when I'm full. Like that sounds so great in theory. And that's really like finding nutritional peace of my book. Like that's my long-term goal for you. Like you will
Right.
get there. But a lot of times when you're starting, it's like you can't trust your hunger when your insulin is high or you have insulin resistance and your insulin's telling you to eat all the time. It's like
Yeah.
you obviously have a lot of stored body fat to tap into, and energy there. It's just your hormones are so whacked out that you need to heal those first. And that's what keto does and the intermittent fasting. And then you get to a place of, wow, I can actually listen to my body. And if I'm hungry, I can eat. If I'm not hungry, I'm not going to eat. But it usually takes sometimes many weeks to months to really get there. So
Yeah.
you have to be a little more diligent about following an actual program and getting those tools and those strategies in place so that you can get to that long-term place of, wow, like my body really does know best.
Yeah.
Just we manipulate it so much that we can't trust it.
Yeah, basically, I mean, if in a perfect world, if we had never wrecked our metabolisms with processed food or anything, we could practice intuitive eating. But like you're saying, our system has basically been broken down by all these foreign invaders that are causing inflammation in our body. And then, riding the sugar roller coaster, our brains are compelling us to eat more sugar, like an addiction. And so that's not really our intuition speaking. That's an addiction speaking, or
Right.
that is a sickness speaking, basically. And so we can't really listen to those messages. We have to kind of restore to our original programming, like reset your phone, essentially, like and
Exactly.
then you actually can listen to the internal signals that you're receiving.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I like to work with my clients on looking at nutrition as a form of self-care. I say that I like to help my clients lose weight with a keto diet, which is a concrete strategy that actually works, but we have to do it from a self-care mindset, because if it feels like restriction, if it feels like misery, we are never going to stick with something long-term. And you mentioned before the word restrictions. And so one thing that our language can be so important in the messages that we send to our brains. And so I really like to use the word boundaries instead of restrictions, because it kind of means essentially the same thing, but one has a positive connotation of like keeping yourself safe and prioritizing your own self and what you need. And basically setting up a protective mechanism to make your life better is what boundaries do. Restriction just feels like, I don't get to have, yada, yada. I'm withholding from myself. Why would I want to do that? And so fasting, I'm sure, can feel that way for people. So how can we actually look at fasting as a form of self-care, and tell us, above and beyond just fat loss, like how are we actually caring for our bodies by doing this? What are the other benefits?
Yeah. I love that you said that. I'm going to use that with clients because it is. It's like a lot of people need the carbohydrate restriction, but yeah, saying like you need a boundary with carbohydrates, I think is a lot more valid and a lot more positive. So I just wrote the word boundaries down. I'm like, I can use that from now on. But yeah, I mean, like I said before, we're looking at healing the hormonal system, and insulin's a big player in the body. And you know, if it's wonky, we're going to have all kinds of issues, and so much chronic disease stems from insulin resistance. And insulin resistance can start from the time you're born, and we're seeing that with kids, which is so sad to me. As kids are being born with high insulin and high blood sugars, and so obviously that can be passed along from the mother even in utero, but it's just growing more and more problematic. So focusing on insulin is going to help all of the whole entire endocrine and hormonal system to just talk better to itself, because basically hormones are little messengers telling our bodies what to do. So if we can heal those and they can work correctly, and so when you mess up insulin, you're messing up basically all the hormones. So the thyroid hormones, the adrenal hormones, the female and the male hormones are just all getting whacked out signals, or they're just not binding to the receptors that they need to, or doing their job with you know, telling your body what it should be doing. So you heal insulin, and really that's at the root of intermittent fasting. And keto is like healing that insulin hormone so that they can all talk better. And so when that happens, that's where it's like we set out to intermittent fast and keto for a purpose. Usually it's like, okay, well, what's my purpose? What am I doing? You know, why do I even want to do this? And those are always questions I ask my client, like, what's your goal? You know, what's your end goal? Why are you even coming to this space? So that we can, you know, as a long term, we can heal that whole endocrine system. And it's just amazing as you're going through the journey and the healing process. It's like, wow, I'm sleeping so much better. I have more energy. That knee that used to bother me so much has now gone away. My digestion is better, and it's just like this amazing process. And I'm not saying it's like you start intermittent fasting, you start keto, everything poof is just gonna be all, you know, perfect. Right. But it is a process, and you know, a lot of times people come to me and they have been doing fasting for a while, and they have been doing low carb, and then we have to take even a deeper dive and say, okay, well, there's something standing in the way of you healing. Let's get to the root cause of that, which can be different for everyone. But I have yet to see a client. Well, I take that back. I had one client who fasting actually backfired on her, and I speak very candidly about this because I had no idea she had a history of an eating disorder. And it wasn't until like our third session together, she's like, I can't do this lifestyle anymore. I'm just, and she's like, I have a history of like a strong history of bulimia and anorexia. I'm like, wait, you didn't tell me that. You should have disclosed that, because this, like you said, like people need boundaries, but sometimes people can take it too far. And so she needed to heal that first, definitely, before she could progress, because the mental aspect, she just wasn't there. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does.
About way.
Yeah, because I think that if we think of fasting as a form of healing our bodies, I think maybe the first thing that comes up for people, which I would have thought back when I first started, is, well, I don't have anything that needs to be healed. Like, I don't have any health diagnoses. You know, a lot of people do have an actual health diagnosis for which insulin resistance is basically the foundation of that. In fact, you know, most of our modern disease is like, I think the statistic is like 70% is actually due to insulin resistance. You know, high blood pressure, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, really PCOS, so like Alzheimer's, all of these things are actually related to insulin resistance and how our body is, you know, basically all the other hormones, like you said, it's like a cascade. It all gets messed up because of insulin being messed up. And so, but for people who don't actually have one of those health diagnoses, I think what comes into play is that we think that something that is common is normal, but that's not true. And so I didn't think that there was any healing to be done in my body, yet I was experiencing what I thought were common symptoms of painful periods, PMS, migraines, acne, bloating after every single meal, being tired. So these are signs that your body needs to heal. But we just totally dismiss that because we think it's normal, right? Can you think of any other things that you've seen with your clients that are like signs like you need some healing in your body?
Right. Yeah. And I know for me, I mentioned the bloating as well. And it just got to the point, I don't know about you, like it started in my early 20s, probably when I was in college and trashed my body, but, and just wrecked a lot of things that stayed wrecked in like my microbiome and all of that when I was in my early 20s. And like you said, I just thought that was normal. Like I'm just one of those people who's going to be bloated for the rest of my life. And, I could barely snap my pants by noon when I would eat a big bowl of oatmeal. Like I thought, hey, that's healthy. That's normal. And that just must be my normal. And same thing with my canker sores. I'm like, I had them in my mouth for like 12 years. They were terrible. But yeah, when you looked at me, you probably thought, well, she's so healthy. She doesn't need to change anything. It's like, but no, I feel like just about every person you talk to has some sort of digestive distress, number one.
Yeah.
Even if you think like they look outwardly healthy, that inwardly they're not. But yeah, I think a lot of some big things that happen are the improvements in sleep, which is going to improve your entire life. I mean, I've always been a good sleeper, but I feel like I sleep so deep, like I barely wake up and I feel restored. And that is huge. And I think just the energy and then just all of that being so positive, it just helps your entire mentality. And I know for me, most of like, I've had some physical improvements, but my mental improvements and just not feeling like I have to eat all the time and feeling like I have to take snacks and worrying about every food that I'm putting in my mouth. Like, is this going to make me gain weight? Is this going to, it's like, it was so constant. And I'd run errands. I'm like, oh, I better bring a snack with, or, like that has been food freedom. That has probably been the biggest, the biggest thing that's in my own personal progress that's been such a help to me, to just hop in the car and be like, I'll be fine until I get home. Or, like I'm in the airport and I'm like, I don't need to eat. I'll just get on the plane and drink my water and I'll be fine. Like just knowing what your body's capable of physically and knowing you can go a couple days without food as long as you stay hydrated. And when you're talking about keto before and people, that kind of going all or nothing, like, okay, I'm going to go from 300 carbs to 50 carbs. Like, just make sure you're hydrated and you have the electrolytes and you'll do a lot better. But yeah, the mental aspect is so empowering, and it does take a while to get there. Like you just got to give it some time. You're not going to get there in a week or two, not usually, depending on how much healing you have to do, but definitely that's a huge positive.
Yeah, absolutely. I really resonate with what you're saying because the food freedom is what made me stick with keto long term. And that's why I say, even now I'm at my weight goal, I'm at a healthy weight. I knew within 2 weeks of being on keto that I wanted to maintain it forever because of the food freedom. I used to just obsess all day long about food, counting calories every single day of my life, like that running total in your head, feeling afraid of going out to eat, afraid of certain foods, like getting to noon and you've already blown your calorie budget for the day and then feeling so defeated, like, oh, now I need to fast the rest of the day. And you try to push yourself to, but then you give in and you end up binging because you feel like, well, I already failed, so I might as well. And it's just this horrible, horrible cycle. And I definitely had disordered thoughts surrounding food. And I love that you mentioned your client who fasting kind of backfired because she had a history of disordered eating. And I resonate with that. I have a history of disordered eating as well, where I would definitely binge at times. I would purge. I used laxatives, which people might not think of that as purging, but it is. Or compensatory exercise is definitely something that I did as another form of purging. And also restricting was like a big thing for me. I would try to go long periods of time without eating. And I would call it fasting sometimes, but I was doing it from the wrong mindset. A lot of times I even put like, I don't know if you have a religious background, but I do. And so I would put the guise of like a religious or a spiritual fast over it, but that really wasn't my true motive at all. I just knew that it was something that I could say and people would leave me alone. And so when I started trying to incorporate fasting, I realized for me that it's been a very sensitive balance of intermittent fasting works for me. But as soon as I try to go beyond 24 hours, I find myself dipping into disordered thoughts again. Like if I wake up in the morning, I had dinner the night before. If I wake up in the morning and I fast the whole day and I make it through that whole day, it's hard. But I've gone an entire day, of not eating from waking up until going to bed. I wake up the next morning and then I start to think, I wonder how long I could do this. I wonder how much weight I could lose. I wonder. And so then I find myself dipping into this like scary territory and feeling like I want to cancel lunch plans, even though I had them because I want to keep fasting or whatever it might be. And I start to feel really disordered surrounding it. And I've learned that that does not work for me. And so, what can we learn about the benefits of fasting? Like what's the difference between fasting, intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, and what's kind of like the minimum viable length of a fast for you to really think like, okay, I can do this. This is realistic for me, as opposed to some people who think like, oh, I could never, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go a whole day without eating. Like, can you explain to us the differences and where we start to see the benefits kick in?
Yeah, and first off, there's no right or wrong when you want to implement intermittent fasting. And I have people who will breeze through a 2 or 3 day fast, and I have people who will struggle to get to 18 hours. So
Right.
it really just depends on where you're at, again, what your goals are. But I like to think of intermittent fasting and time restricted eating are kind of the same.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that's under 24 hours is basically intermittent fasting,
Yeah.
or eating in a time restricted window. And sometimes when I'm working with clients, we talk more about it being a time restricted eating window, because fasting can seem really scary to some people, especially when you're starting out, and it can be a turnoff. It's like, oh my gosh, is she gonna make me fast 3 days when I
Right.
when I don't want to? It's like, no, I've had plenty of clients who have never done more than a 24-hour fast or even a 20-hour fast or whatever it is, and have done very well and seen a lot of progress. My sister-in-law is one of those. She only ever did 18 hours. She would, mainly stop eating by 6 o'clock and start eating around noon the next day. And she lost 50 pounds in a year. And then there's others who do that and just don't see a lot of progress. So then it's like, okay, do we have to look at what you're actually eating, or do we have to just change up the fasting cycle? And I know for me, like I've been starting to open my window earlier several days, but because I am a morning person and a morning exerciser, and there's some studies out that show eating earlier in the day and having your eating window earlier can be beneficial. So just doing that, I feel better doing that. Like I'll eat from 10 to 3 or 4 and then, have and just not eat dinner, because I don't care if I eat dinner or not, where it's harder for me to fast, like you said, like all day long and feel like, oh my gosh, how many hours do I have here? So it really is just like, what's going to work for you and what's your lifestyle? I only do that like an earlier window. I have 3 kids and, things going on in the evenings a lot. So if I know that I'm going to be at an event or out and about, that's the days that I'll do that, because the family meal can be, very important and a time to connect. So you just have to work it into your lifestyle. Like I said, there's no right or wrong, but I do encourage people to start at least at like 14 to 16 hours, like get that amount of time. Some people say 12 even is beneficial, but by the time people want to work with me, usually they're pretty sick. So it's like 14 to 16 hours. And I really think not even focusing so much on the hours every day that you're fasting, but just switching it up. And, sometimes eating at 10 in the morning, sometimes eating at 3, waiting until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, sometimes doing 16 hours of fasting, sometimes doing 20. That is more important than like, okay, I can only eat from 12 to 6 every single day,
Right.
and just fitting it into your lifestyle. and taking advantage of your personal schedule and what's going to work for you. But yeah, going beyond 24 hours is considered more of an extended fast. And if people are having a lot of issues with not being able to lose weight, or they have severe insulin resistance, or have been diagnosed with diabetes, the therapeutic level of fasting is 24 to 36 hours a couple of times a week. So if people are willing to try that, I will oftentimes, we'll do that for a couple of weeks and see how they do. It is hard for that first sleep to like go overnight with fasting is tough. But if you have a lot of body fat, extra body fat, your body typically knows what to do. I'm kind of like you. It's like I don't have a lot of extra body fat, and I think like your body just knows like, okay, like a 24-hour fast is good, and I'll just do like a 36 to 40 hour fast, maybe once a month, something like that. But yeah, people who have a lot of extra body fat, or have really high insulin resistance, they can definitely do some extended fasting. I don't recommend anybody go beyond 5 days when I'm working with them, because there's just not a ton of benefit to it with autophagy and that sort of thing. And if they're doing a longer fast, like 3 to 5, I say once a month is good. Like just give your body time to replenish. We always focus on electrolytes and staying hydrated. But yeah, it's what works for you. And some people will do intermittent fasting during the week, and the weekends they're more relaxed, and that's fine too. I do always caution people, like, okay, if we're relaxing on the time that you're eating, just be careful we're not like binging or giving yourself the green light to eat anything and everything you want, because you can undo pretty much all the progress that you did during the week. Yeah. So yeah, there's no right or wrong, but if somebody wants to get started, definitely like just stop eating after dinner and don't snack, and start to just push it back in the morning. Or you can cut off your dinner time a little bit earlier. And yeah, the beauty of that is most of your fasting time is while you're sleeping. So
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that you're saying that it's actually good to switch it up, because when I first started doing intermittent fasting, like I said, I'm just such a person of like routine and order and organization. And so I set this little idea or rule for myself. I'm going to practice 16-8 and just only eat within an 8-hour window. And on the weekends, I would feel like conflict. My husband would say, "Do you want to go out to breakfast?" And I would feel like I had to say no because of my plan to practice intermittent fasting. So, but actually it's good to switch things up. So for me to then go out to breakfast on a weekend and have breakfast at 9 a.m. when normally I wouldn't have started eating until 11 a.m., that can actually be a really good thing. And then I find myself feeling pretty full. And we might have like a really late lunch if we had breakfast. And so I'm ending my eating window probably by like 4 p.m. that day. And so that's actually a really good thing, is to switch things up, because our bodies start to get in a rut. We start to achieve balance or homeostasis. And so what was working before stops working. When what was working before stops working, it's time to switch things up and try something new.
Right. And I used to find when I would eat earlier in the day, I would be hungry all day. And that is just a sign that I was a sugar burner, and my hormones were out of whack. And it's now I don't feel that. So for a while it was hard for me to say, okay, I should eat earlier, maybe once or twice a week, and see how I feel. Cause I was like, oh, but then I'm going to be hungry all day. But now I'm just like you said, it's like if I eat a good nourishing, we'll call it breakfast, but earlier meal, I don't need to eat till like late afternoon or early to late afternoon, and then I'm just done for the day. So yeah, how you want to do the timing is really up to you and what works with your lifestyle. And I know, like, when I first started this, I had a conversation with my kids and my family, like, mom is not doing this because she's starving herself, or like, we're doing this to get healthier and do some internal healing. And so I think that if your kids are old enough, having that conversation is helpful too.
Yeah. So I want to ask you specifically, I know my audience is mainly women. I don't know about yours, but for women who are still experiencing a menstrual cycle, Should we be taking that into account with our fasting plans? Are there times that are more optimal to fast or times that we shouldn't fast? I know, we might tend to want to eat all the things when we're on our periods or whatever. So like, or at least we tell ourselves that that's the story. So yeah, give us some advice or input on timing your fasting according to your cycle, if at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I do have people pay attention to this for sure. I know when I first started, I didn't really pay attention to it. And I think intermittent fasting, I don't think it plays a huge role
Right.
with the hormones, but definitely if you're trying to incorporate some longer fast, you definitely want to be careful. So like weeks 1 and 2, so the tail end of your period and into that next week are usually the best times to do some longer fasts if you want to,
Mm-hmm.
because estrogen levels are high or higher.
Mm-hmm.
And then those weeks 3 and 4, the so it would be the week prior to, and that other the week before that, so weeks 3 and 4, progesterone comes higher, and that's when your appetite starts to be stimulated.
Mm-hmm.
You feel hungrier. Your insulin sensitivity even changes a little bit, and you just utilize macronutrients a little bit differently. So those are the times where you want to lay off, especially longer fasts. I always feel like intermittent fast, as long as I'm like below like 20 hours, or if I'm focusing on eating 2 meals a day, I'm still fine. But I can definitely tell my appetite is different in weeks 1 and 2, it not being as high versus weeks 3 and 4 when progesterone is higher. And so we don't necessarily need to eat carbohydrates to make progesterone. But if we don't have enough protein or carbohydrate, then we can run into trouble with being able to stimulate those female hormones, and especially progesterone. So I actually have people do some carb flexing when they work with me, just so that you're not in ketosis all the time. So your body can then go back and do some sugar burning. If you're wanting to lose weight, being in ketosis is helpful more of the time. But yeah, so we do some carb flexing, and I usually have them up their carbohydrate if they're menstruating, like that week, like 2 weeks after your period, when you would likely be ovulating, just to give your body some more carbohydrate, and being strategic about the carbohydrates. So if you're doing 50, I say, okay, maybe bump it up to like 100, and focus on the whole intact carbohydrates. Don't be, eating chips and crackers and all of that stuff. But yeah, being strategic about that. For people who aren't menstruating, or for men, I just usually have them, they can like pick a day out of the week to carb flex, or 1 week every 4 weeks if they want to do a week of carb flexing, and then just go back to your lower carb lifestyle after that.
Yeah. Actually, the last guest that I had on, Evie from The Healthy Parent, is with us right now. And she was chatting about that as well, how she started incorporating some carb ups surrounding her menstrual cycle, because she was experiencing period problems after being in ketosis for so long. And so basically, I'm hearing you say that if you have a lot more weight to lose, you may find it easier to just stay in ketosis all the time, and you're not going to notice any kind of like negative symptoms or any kind of problems with your period. But if you're at a healthy weight, or even underweight, you probably don't want to be in ketosis or fasting those at least 10 days leading up to your period, because your body is working overtime. It's basically creating a new organ every single month, which is crazy and weird to think about. But, we actually need more calories towards the end of our cycle, because our bodies are burning more energy on those internal processes. Even if your lifestyle hasn't changed inwardly, you're doing a lot more inside of your body, and you need that energy. So I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Kind of at a little bit different place hormonally.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then the other factor that comes in is, are you eating enough protein? Because we can convert protein to carbohydrate via gluconeogenesis. So just even bumping up, if you're not comfortable with bumping the carbs up, you could bump up protein if you are comfortable doing that, for sure.
Yeah, I'm a person that I don't do I don't carb cycle. Maybe like 1 or 2 days a month, I might have a little bit higher carbs, but it would probably be like 75, at the most. I find that I'm able to keep that food peace, like you talk about, by staying low carb, even when, I need more energy for my body. So what I do is I try to increase calories during that time, and just allow that to be okay. A lot of my clients, I find that they'll text me one day and they'll say, I wasn't planning to eat till lunch, but I was just so hungry this morning. And they're like, I don't know what's up with that. And a lot of times they'll like almost be berating themselves. And I'll say, well, do you check your cycle? What day of the month is it?
Right.
And, because sure enough, I want to have what I would consider a carb up for me, which is around 75 carb. I'm like, I just want to eat like a whole quart of strawberries. And then I'll go open up my app. I use the free app called Clue. And I'm like, day 19, like clockwork, and then I just let it be okay. And so I try to advise my clients on that as well, that it's normal to actually experience more hunger towards the end of your cycle, and it's okay. It's not going to throw off your weight loss goals.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And in fact, it'll probably help you long term. And I even saw like, my weight only fluctuates about 3 pounds usually.
Yeah.
Now that with this lifestyle, but I found like just changing the time that my eating window to earlier a couple times a week, like that's enough to just stay at that lower end of what's normal for me typically.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think probably the burning question on everybody's mind is, if we do fast, like let's say we do a longer fast, a 24 to 48 hour fast, and we step on the scale and we're all excited because, oh my gosh, I've lost 3 pounds in 2 days. And then, people wonder, but is it just going to come right back on as soon as I start eating again? And so what is like normal and to be expected, so that if we do gain some back, we don't feel frustrated and feel like, well, that didn't work, I'm not fasting anymore.
Right. And physically, your body only loses about 1/2 pound of body fat every full day that you fast. So keep that in mind. So even if you did like a 4-day fast, 1/2 pound of actual body fat every day would be 2 pounds of actual body fat. So it's kind of like, oh, am I going to do this 4-day fast to lose 2 pounds of body fat? And so you're definitely, as insulin levels come down, there's kind of that flushing, like you said, with the water weight, but now we're really dropping insulin levels when we're fasting. So we have more of that flushing. We have water weight go, our electrolytes. That's why it's so important, especially in a longer fast, to make sure that you're getting like, I advise my people to put like either electrolyte drops or trace minerals, even putting some good sea salt or Redmond salt under the tongue while you're fasting. But a lot of it can be water weight or, just that flushing. But so if you did, say we did a 4-day fast and you lost 5 pounds during that time, probably 2 of it was actually body fat. So you could expect to regain probably half that weight the next day after you nourish yourself. And that's okay, because we're really wanting to lose the body fat. We don't want to lose the lean tissue and we want to replenish ourselves with hydrating too. So that's kind of what you can expect. Everybody's a little bit different. And we all know those people who do a 16-8 and they fast 16 hours and the weight just falls off. There's people who do a 16-8 and really don't see much change. So you got to play around with it and give it a good month before you decide, okay, I don't think that this is a strategy that's going to be helpful for me.
Yes. Okay. That is so helpful to just actually have that magic number, people who are listening. Like, okay, you can expect that the real fat loss was about 1/2 pound per day. Anything else, you're probably going to gain back, and that's okay. That's normal. It's water weight. Once you reintroduce carbohydrates, not that you're eating like high carb, but just any carbohydrates, your body does retain some water for each gram of carbohydrates that you eat. So thank you so much for that. I would love to know what your thoughts are on modified fasting, because some people have a pretty difficult time water fasting. Can we still see benefits from modified fasting? Can you explain what that is and how to go about it?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because this is a topic that I've been looking more and more into as of late. And I follow Maria Emmerich, if you're familiar with her.
Oh, yeah.
She does the protein sparing modified. And that's what I recommend, especially if people like their main goal is fat loss.
Mm.
Like just if you're having trouble with doing a 24-hour fast, let's try a protein sparing modified fast like 2 times a week and see how you do. Because just that amount of protein, so probably like 90 to 100 grams for most people, give or take, is just going to keep you nourished enough. You're still going to get a lot of benefits from the fast. You know, you probably won't tap into autophagy as much as if you would if you did a water fast, but it can work really well as a transition. And in my program, I actually talk about this. If you're stuck and not seeing results, like just do that, incorporate that a couple times a week and see what happens. And like we talked about, just changing things up and making things different can be very helpful. But yeah, I do recommend those like a couple of times a week. And I recommend the protein sparing one. It just seems mentally, it seems a lot easier for a lot of people, just knowing, oh, I can have meat and eggs, you know, and it suppresses the appetite, and that's helpful. And then, you know, maybe the next week you try going without the protein and see how you do. But because there's benefits to both, you know, it's like what are your goals again? Or if your goal is more about burning fat and losing weight, having those protein modified fasts is very important. If you're doing more longevity or cancer prevention, or wanting to really just keep your immune system healthy, then maybe doing the water fast is a bigger part of what your goals should be.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the protein sparing modified fast. That's something that I have tried, and it did help me too, because it felt like, well, at least I don't have to not eat. And it's still switching up a strategy and still getting some benefits to it. So for people who are unfamiliar with protein sparing modified fast, you can definitely, you know, Google that, look that up. Also, Maria Emmerich, she has an amazing PSMF bread that's very tasty. Whether you're actually going to do protein sparing modified fast or not, it's an awesome bread to have on keto because it's high protein. So check that out. So for people who are maybe not sure how to do a protein sparing modified fast, can you give us like how much protein should we be aiming for? How much fat should we be aiming for? How much carbs should we be aiming for? Calories, like how would that work?
Yeah, the carbs are 0. It's basically like eating carnivore. Sorry, my battery went low.
That's okay. We're still here.
But carbs are 0, alcohol 0. So it's basically just like pure protein.
Yeah.
And 80 to 90 grams is a good amount to shoot for women, like maybe even up to 100. And then for men, more like 100 to 120, somewhere in there. I'm trying to remember the exact calculation. If it was I don't want to give you the wrong information, but if it was 0.7 per pound of mass, something along those. But yeah, you might want to look up the specifics for that before you implement it. But I do remember it's around 100 for most people, a little bit lower for women, and a little bit higher for men. But yeah, that gives you a good amount of meat. So it's just pure protein is what you're looking at. So no vegetables, no fruit, no carbs. No alcohol. That would be fun, but
yeah. And as I understand it, you would want to stick with like leaner cuts of meat too.
Yeah, yes. So the fat, you don't really add any fat. It's just the fat that is found in the meat. But yes, you would want to do like steak over, well, I shouldn't say any steak, like a tenderloin over like what would be a
ribeye.
Ribeye, or what is the other one that I can't bring myself to eat, but it's really like the fat's all over it, and I'm blanking on it. But yeah, so leaner cuts, yes.
Yeah, awesome. And what are your thoughts on bulletproof fasting? So you kind of have told about like, okay, a modified fast as like just protein, but what about a modified fast as just fat, like the bulletproof fasting?
Yeah, I think. I'm sorry, I had an interview right before this, so I hope that I didn't already talk about this. But if you want to like bulletproof your coffee, that kind of thing, are you referring to? Okay, so if you wanted to add like I do have people come and say, oh, I do bulletproof coffee, I add this amount of butter or MCT oil. I don't think that that's harmful in any way. It's just if people are wanting to fast, I think that can be a good stepping stone or a good transition into water fasting or water, tea, or coffee. But just remember that those fatty acids are in your bloodstream then, and that's what your body's going to burn first. So I like to encourage people, if you need to do that for a few weeks, great. But then let's try to transition into water only or coffee and tea as much. Shoot. I lost you right there.
Still here.
As much as possible.
Still here.
And then work your way into just a water fast.
Yeah, that makes sense. I try to tell my clients too, because a lot of times they're like, I have to have my coffee in the morning and I have to have my heavy whipping cream.
Right.
If that means that I'm not intermittent fasting, then I don't think it's even worth it for me to do it. And I'm like, don't let that hold you back. It's just, some straight fat is not going to cause that much of an insulin response. If your heavy whipping cream in your morning coffee is helping you to not eat your lunch until noon, as opposed to having your morning coffee with heavy whipping cream and a full breakfast, like that's still a positive. So let's do that. Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. And then last question for you. We talked before about people who maybe have a history of disordered eating, and that maybe, if you trying to fast is triggering those disordered thoughts, maybe scale back, maybe, stick to less than a 24-hour fast. Are there any other types of people that you can think of who you would caution them, don't fast? It's probably not advisable for you to do that.
Yeah, definitely the disordered eating. And if you're healed from your eating disorder, it's something that you could try. But if it's an active eating disorder, then for sure, it's not something that you want to try until you're healed from that. But pregnant, breastfeeding, those are not good times to start fasting. And I think some pregnant women can do fine eating 2 full meals, but don't feel like you need to, intermittent fast while you're pregnant. So those are the main categories that you definitely want to use caution with. And then just, your own personality more than anybody else. So if you're somebody who just tends to take things to extreme, you probably want to stay more on the lower end of the intermittent fasting than to challenge yourself to longer fasts. And there's people out there who are doing longer fasts every single week, and that's not healthy for your body either. It's like we have to balance it. We have to break down, and then we have to replenish, and then we break down, and then we replenish. And so not having a healthy balance can definitely wreak more havoc than good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, thinking of fasting as a form of self-care, the same way with our nutrition, it's not about being dogmatic. It's not about following some rigid set of rules where you either succeeded or you failed. You're either on or you're off, or you're black or you're white. The same way that you would design the diet that works best for you. Some people eat more carbs than other people, and so you do what works for you. Some people can eat a certain type of food, and other people have reactivity to it. So even though it's allowed on keto, you should not eat that as a form of self-care if you feel awful every time that you eat it, So it's not about surrendering your will to some outside protocol from on high and you're following the rules and therefore you're going to succeed. It's about, creating a protocol that actually works for you in terms of fasting. Yeah. Yeah. Shana, thank you so much for coming on today. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to share?
I think we covered a lot. I just want everyone to realize, everybody's fasting journey is a little bit different. Their keto journeys always different. So what works for you or worked for your loved one or your friend or whatever isn't going to necessarily work for you. And that's okay. You need to make this your own, find what works for you. My podcast is Fast to Heal Stories, and I just love hearing everybody's different stories because everybody brings something a little bit different to the table. So so don't expect the same results. Don't expect your weight to be linear either. It's it's a journey. It's a transition for your body, and to focus on health over weight for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd love for you to share with us, where can people find you online? What type of services do you offer? How people can work with you? And also, where can people get your book?
Yeah, so my book is called Fast to Heal. That's available on Amazon, or my website is called fasttoheal.info, and I sell the digital form there and the audio form there. I have a 6-week program called Finding Nutritional Peace, which is all about reversing your insulin resistance and weight loss and reversing chronic disease. That part of that program is lifelong coaching with me, live weekly coaching. So on my Instagram bio, you can schedule a discovery call to see if you would be a good fit for that program. And then my podcast is called Fast to Heal Stories. So you can find that on iTunes and all the major podcast platforms. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And for anybody, I'm going to share this to my podcast later. So for anybody that's not, watching this on Instagram, what is your Instagram handle so that people can go find you?
Yeah, my Instagram handle is at shana.husson.rdn. And everything else is basically Fast to Heal. So my Facebook page is Fast to Heal. My website is Fast to Heal. My book is Fast to Heal. And then it's just my name on Instagram.
Okay, awesome. Thank you again so much, Shana. This was really informative, really helpful. I feel like we've got some really concrete takeaways about when to fast, how long is good, ways to still make it work for you if you feel like, doing it in the traditional, 36 to 48 hours, you're just like, heck no, I could never do that. But you could see that there are still some ways to really design it in a way that works for you. And, I really love collaborating with other coaches because we're not all, super passionate or super expert in every single niche in the world. Like we all have different niches. And so while fasting is something like I've shared that, I do it a little bit more mild because that's what works for me. I really appreciate having somebody come on and share options for implementing it in a more intense way. And, I try not to speak to things that I don't do. And so, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be valuable for a lot of people. So I love you coming in today and just filling those gaps to really share this great information with both of our audiences today. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Honored to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great week. Bye-bye.